coronavirus pandemic has one of the positive impacts it's had is the major disruptive impact on gender roles as more men find themselves tackling domestic chores. It's a form of sort of subtle coercion, as many couples and families under lockdown found themselves confined within their family home, and men are participating apparently far more in housework and childcare, and this will inevitably and hopefully lead to a long-term change. But on a more positive aspect of it is that it's challenging the gender norms within the home, especially within patriarchal societies, as gender division of housework being done by men and women conveys that more men will now willingly be far more proactive in undertaking not only domestic household chores but also childcare responsibilities. And this is something that we've all sort of probably wanted to see for many years, but it's very difficult to implement. And with lockdown and with the coronavirus pandemic not being able to really venture into the workplace, with many of us, regions now relegated to sort of tighter restrictions with regards to movement during, at least for the foreseeable future, whilst governments are still trying to combat the R rate of infection of the coronavirus and keep numbers down. So we're all being advised to work from home as much as possible. And many companies are finding themselves adjusting to this new government guidelines. And obviously many parents find themselves once again juggling caring for their children, domestic housework, and also working from the confines of their homes. So in effect, your home has become the main place for everything. So inevitably, one of the benefits men have had to step up on the home front, and I think very few female partners or other partners will tolerate any excuses. Again, excuses won't be forgiven. Oh, I'm sure we've all heard it. I possibly don't know how to use the washing machine, or I don't know how to use the hoover properly, whatever excuses there could be. We're just not really prepared to tolerate it. And I think that sort of laziness and apathy, again, is no longer something that is forgiven, really. In actual fact, it probably can cause a lot more arguments as well, as men are finding themselves now having to really roll up their shirt sleeves and get stuck in helping around the house without making a plethora of excuses. That could be doing a lot of household chores which they possibly found extremely tedious, but some may ironically find that the tedium can be quite sort of something they enjoy. For example, ironing, washing, cooking meals, cleaning, hoovering, dusting. The list is endless. So no longer is oh, well, I'm busy, engaged doing DIY, they may find alternative domestic chores something that really is of interest to them. So it's almost like an awakening, I suppose you could say. But the list is endless, and more men seem to be more than happy to partake and take on that extra workload of their partners. And it is something that they have to, it's a lot to do also with, I think, with empathy, having empathy when you observe your partner not only having to manage working from home, so they're doing an 8-hour shift that they usually may do over at the office, but they're working remotely from home, and also looking after and taking on the responsibility of the childcare. So it's all expected that for many decades that females can manage juggling all these various balls. It was almost sort of automatically anticipated that the bulk of the childcare and domestic chores would be relegated to the female, and now men are far more engaged in the education of their children, and working from home is probably becoming a lot more tolerable as well, knowing that your partner is taking a far more greater share of responsibility for domestic chores and childcare responsibilities, without presenting it with a gamut of excuses. More men are enthusiastic about partaking in childcare than ever before. The pandemic has had a lasting effect and impact, and many will find themselves possibly working from home for a longer while than we initially all anticipated. And the mother cannot be ever singled out as a primary parent responsible for the care of the children and running of the home. And this is something which the coronavirus pandemic lockdowns have highlighted, that to men just how much I feel that they can observe it is hard work juggling all these different roles, and they're far more actively engaged in home life and taking on that role quite happily. And this is one of the disruptions which in actual fact is, or disruptive impacts of coronavirus lockdown, which will change attitudes towards caregiving and family life. So across the board, I think that it's a lot more egalitarian sharing between the two partners within many families, and it's something that really has been evolving gradually for decades, but accelerated in 2020 as we all just are forced into this situation of which is unprecedented, but again it's just a long-term behavioural change. And I think the next thing is, all the key aspect of it will be that in many workplaces men have not really been considered, they admitting to wanting to work from home or asking for flexible working hours, to be more of a caregiver, taking on the responsibility for their children, that these major barriers within the workplace are now being mitigated, and the pandemic has forced a lot of companies to not only normalise remote working, but it's also forced them to challenge what they consider that sort of, or shall we say, that sort of macho image of male employees. If I feel like it'll be easier for male employees to be asked for flexible working and to cater to the demands of both family life and their job roles. And this is hopefully going to be a lasting change. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. You can subscribe to the Comments podcast via iTunes, Spotify, and other major podcast providers. Welcome to Comments Podcast, the show where we discuss a variety of topics with your host, Nina.